Hello everybody, welcome to today's webinar, Managing Partner Risk in Global Business, What You Don't Know Could Hurt You. I'm Kevin Spurway, VP of Operations here for Appian, and I'm really excited about the webinar today, which we're partnering with KPMG to produce. Managing effective due diligence on foreign agents and third parties is one of the most challenging anti-bribery and corruption issues facing global companies today. And as you know, failure to adequately scrutinize vendors, agents, business partners can be really problematic. It can expose your business to reputational damage, operational risk, even criminal penalty. And today we've got three great experts to help us address some of these issues. So first and foremost from KPMG, we've got Graham Murphy. He's a principal in the forensic practice of KPMG. Based out of Chicago, he leads the Midwest forensic practice, and he's KPMG's Forensic National Industry Coordinator, advising companies on third-party risk management programs and providing integrity due diligence services. He also leads KPMG Risk Consulting third-party risk management, and he's the America's leader of Astris, which is KPMG's third-party due diligence solution. We also have Mark Ignatius. Mark is the director in the technology enablement practice of KPMG with 15 years of advisory experience. He provides technology enablement and expertise in leading digital products to KPMG's Global Forensic Corporate Intelligence Network and supports KPMG's third-party risk management programs and initiatives. Working with KPMG clients across a variety of industry verticals, he spearheaded development of an enterprise platform for risk management, and that solution combines a robust risk rating module with modern digital experience that features mobile, social, and analytical capabilities in a package designed for rapid customization to meet individual client needs. And that solution is featured in Appian's new app market, and Mark's going to be talking about that solution later today. Finally, we have Mark Wilson from Appian. Mark is a co-founder of Appian, and he's responsible for the company's sales into financial services, insurance, and pharmaceuticals. Mark's prior roles at Appian include building Appian's global partnership team and running Appian Professional Services. Mark has deep experience implementing Appian, addressing a variety of risk management and compliance challenges, including third-party diligence and FCPA compliance, among others. So Mark is going to lead off the webinar today. He's going to give a quick introduction of Appian and talk more generally about our capabilities in the compliance space. We'll then turn it over to Graham and Mark of KPMG, who will dive deeper into the challenges of third-party diligence, the elements of an effective third-party risk management program, and how to use technology as an enabler. And when they're wrapped up, we'll do Q&A. So if you have questions as we go through the webinar today, just type them in the chat box that you see and go to webinar on the right hand of your screen. We'll read those questions out loud and address them in the end. So with that, let me turn things over to Mark Wilson.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to give a brief background today on Appian, what we do, and how we go about doing it. In my role in overseeing our sales in financial services, insurance, and pharmaceuticals, one of the principal target areas that Appian gets involved in is in the regulatory and compliance space. We see it in many different shapes and forms. It's important to understand, first of all, what Appian is. Historically, we've been understood as one of the leaders in the business process management space. We're really good at managing your processes, providing transparency about where things are, and providing audit trails about where things have been and who made what decisions. Really an ideal combination of features to provide a regulatory compliance solution. One of the biggest strengths to Appian, however, has been the introduction over the last few years of the data elements within Appian. Today, we treat the process and data as first-class objects in our software, and to combine together, we consider that to be the strongest platform in the market for custom application development, allowing not only the speedy development of new applications, but also the unification of those applications into a holistic platform that allows you to manage any different kind of asset in your organization, whether it's a customer, an account, a drug, a fund. The unification of process and data provides the most powerful way for managing various risks and keeping on top of changes that might happen in your organization. Among the things that this platform is capable of doing is providing you a consolidated view of both data and process together, giving you that transparency and unification to allow you to do everything in one place as opposed to a set of distinctive point solutions that many organizations are plagued with today. As a result, Appian has been recognized by the analyst community, Gartner, Forrester, IDC, etc., as the leader in business process management, as a leader in case management, and combined we're seen as the #1 platform as a service, both in terms of technology as well as with the speed that we can deliver solutions to your end users. From a compliance perspective, we deal with, as we say here, a broad spectrum of compliance solutions. Not only the filing work that might need to be done from a pharmaceutical or financial way in the regulatory information management space, making sure that everybody has signed off on things, that all the information is together to provide for filings, but also in the proactive risk management that needs to take place. Appian has been successful in delivering a variety of compliance and regulatory solutions ranging from KYC and AML in the financial services space to RIM-based solutions, regulatory information management solutions in the pharmaceutical space, to how filings with the FDA or European Drug Agency happen, to how filings with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency or other Treasury entities need to happen. As new regulations come up, our customers have found that Appian is the best and fastest platform to respond to both changes in current regulations as well as the introduction of new regulations into the marketplace. We do this through a variety of mechanisms. By having a basis and process, we allow for automatic data collection from other systems as well as data collection through the normal, ordinary actions that happen in processes. For example, when you onboard a new customer, you onboard a new drug, you onboard a new account, it gives you the opportunity to collect a wealth of information that you ordinarily would do rather than making it a separate thing that you might need to take on from a compliance-only perspective. We found in most organizations that we've been able to significantly and substantially reduce the time it takes to be in compliance, reduce risk, and reduce the error rate that it takes that happens in order to be successful. All of this culminates in a concept in Appian today that we call records. Records are a topic. They're the nouns and verbs of your organization. A record could be a customer. It could be an account. It could be a third-party vendor that you're evaluating. The records concept allows you to bring up that topic and see all of the process and all of the data information that's relevant to that particular topic, regardless of where that data may ultimately reside in your organization. Today we see customers creating unified views of vendors, accounts, customers, products, the 360-degree view, if you will. The cliche that's there is actually coming true in Appian because we can leave data where it lies, but give the end user one place to go to see what's going on and then take action on them. A record, as we understand it, as we describe it, allows you to have both an audit trail and visibility for everything that's going on. A record as an account or as a drug could have numerous processes that happen over time. Users interact with it. You have the ability to keep an audit trail of all of those interactions, to be able to search for whatever you're looking for without requiring users to understand the 15 or 20 other systems that might actually hold that data. We can bring it all together in one unified case. We're very excited today to have KPMG with us. They've constructed along this vision a very good solution in the third-party vendor space and the risk space. They're going to talk not only about that solution, but some other perspectives that they have in bringing this technology to bear on the problems of in the compliance area. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Graham and to Kevin, and we look forward to answering your questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So as was discussed, we're going to speak a little bit about third-party risk management programs. And by the way, good morning to everybody. We're also going to talk about the due diligence solution, our case-enabled solution to deal with third parties, because this is a critical area that companies are dealing with. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And we'll talk about some solution features and functionality that as our clients are building out technology-enabled systems, that they should be looking at the features and functionalities to enable them to do their job more efficiently, more effectively on a daily basis. So what we would do on this slide and create with the wheel is to look at the many drivers of risk management in third party. And clearly, companies and our clients are telling us they're trying to come to grips with all of the various risks that third parties present. And in looking at that, we really look at the life cycle of third parties. And what I mean by that is, first there's the onboarding of third parties. Do you actually want to be in business with these third parties in the first place? And when you look at the wheel, there's certain things that you should be considering when you're onboarding third parties. And that would be, a topic of today, and the focus of today is around anti-bribery and corruption and, fraud awareness, from that perspective, of that risk, anti-bribery and corruption. From a IT security risk, we're seeing a lot in the press around third parties presenting a risk for penetration of cyber attacks, and that's covered under IT security risks. Under merger and acquisition risks down at the bottom, you obviously want to be doing due diligence on your third parties before getting into business with them, whether it's a joint venture or an acquisition or the like. In the financial services sector, you're looking at know your customer issues in the area of preventing anti-money laundering. So there's a number of risks that are present when you're looking at onboarding a third party. The next is, once you've onboarded the third party, are you getting what you signed up for? Are you getting what you contracted for? And again, there's a number of, I'll call them risks, but risks turn into opportunities. And there's financial and operational risks. Do you have processes in place to ensure you're having the visibility into your supply chain that you should have? Do you have the ability to create metrics and evaluate your suppliers and determine which suppliers are performing well, which ones are not performing? In the area of revenue assurance risks, are you ensuring that from your relationships with your various customers, that are you getting what you should be getting from those contracts? And then clearly in the financial services sector, there's a whole myriad of, getting ready for the regulator when that person or that entity walks in, and are you ready for the scrutiny that they will bring? And then obviously throughout this process, you're going to decide whether or not you want to stay in business with that third party, and you look at offboarding issues. So what we've attempted to accomplish with this wheel is to look at the various risks that our clients and companies are subject to on a regular basis. So it's both the risks and opportunities that third parties present. So, what are some of the challenges? KPMG issued a recent survey in the anti-bribery and corruption space and found, interestingly, but maybe not so unexpectedly, that third parties possess or pose a challenge in executing their anti-bribery and corruption programs. And when you peel back the onion, really what that means is they're having challenges in understanding who their third parties are and the risks that they present, and two, the ability to provide effective due diligence on some of these third parties which operate around the world in very far-flung places, and it creates a challenge. So that's what our clients are telling us. Clearly, companies are required to perform due diligence on third parties. It's set out in statute. It's provided guidance by the regulators, whether it's the OCC, the Fed, the DOJ, and the SEC in the area of anti-bribery and corruption. Clearly that it has to be done, and it has to be done on a risk-based process. But as I said earlier, there are opportunities for looking at the third parties to ensure you're getting the most out of those. And taking out cost is another reason why companies are looking at their third parties. And clearly, often, and maybe oftentimes when we have our clients and we start doing due diligence on those third parties, they often question why are they in business with them in the first place. They might have 2 or 3 vendors for the same function, and they look to rationalize, the third-party universe. But clearly, the process, and we'll talk about the process involved in looking at that, but it looks at, communication with third parties, risk assessments, due diligence, and the like. So if we turn to the next slide, Mark. This is a view, KPMG's view of the third-party, program, third-party process. And we put it into 4 steps. While this is a continuous process, we look at these 4 distinct yet interrelated in steps. The first one is identifying the universe of your third parties and which ones you want to put through the process. All of the regulators agree this needs not to be done, the same due diligence on all of your third parties. It's a risk-based process that you're going to do. You're not going to put potentially all of your third parties even through, the gathering further information. There's going to be a subset of those that are just too small and maybe geographically based that you're not going to put through a process. But what we're finding with many of our clients is that they're using this process, one, to onboard new third parties as they become known, and to play catch-up, because we see that there's a very diversion of maturity in our clients' programs. Some have just embarked on a program of looking at due diligence and managing things by spreadsheet. Others have already started using technology-enabled systems and have robust due diligence processes in place. We see the gambit. So we see it both from an onboarding perspective and looking to, I'll call it play catch-up, where you're at. The next phase is gathering information around your third parties and, looking at a system that will be able to send a questionnaire to the business sponsor to gather further information, to perform an initial risk assessment at that point. Depending on that, whether you risk accept or risk reject or gather further information, the ability to send a due diligence questionnaire to the third party on a web-enabled basis, and then again, based on the responses, gather a further risk rating. And we'll talk a little bit more about the risk ratings, but once you perform that risk rating at that point, what level of due diligence? Again, not all due diligence is created equal. You may want to perform less due diligence for the less risky third parties, obviously more due diligence on those that present greater risk. And then perform that due diligence, what do you do with them? Do you accept the risk and move on? Because at the end of the day, if you find risk in your third party, it is not a gating issue. It's not to terminate the risk. The goal of this process is to gather information around those third parties and make better, more informed decisions. So technology enablement, and that's really the topic of today. I'd just like to make a point here that you want to make sure, a lot of companies out there spend a lot of time and effort in coming up with their anti-bribery corruption third-party program with various levels of delegation of authority, etc. Spend a lot of time on the program and process. You want technology that's going to enable that process, not obtain a technology which is going to force your program into and fit into a certain technology. And I think that's what you're going to hear today. But clearly, as you go through, and maybe one of the things that is a neat feature, or should be a feature of your system, is driving risks. And what we're trying to do there is, when we're asking questions and have these web-enabled surveys, we have them, binary questions, so that, in fact, if it's a yes or no to, are you a political, maybe that's an easy question, are you, connected, or do you have some political affiliations? Asking those types of questions drive a risk score, which will then drive you further into the process. So here are some of the common challenges that we see our clients face, and probably the evolution of where our clients and companies are looking to go. We find that many of our clients are, their processes are very manual intensive. They're on spreadsheets. They spend a lot of time and effort gathering information, gathering the third parties. These lists are kept not usually in one location, and they're very difficult to manage. Without the advent or technology enabled, you don't have visibility into the process to determine where the evaluation of the third parties might be in the process. You're likely spending significant time, effort, and resources in preparing these spreadsheets and really responding to audit committee requests and those looking at the program for results, key performance indicators and the like. And in most companies today, that information for third parties are coming out of multiple systems, that need to be accessed, and then reporting, becomes next to impossible because of the lack of ability. So if you move to where companies are trying to move to, they want an automated flow. They want a single, and I'll call it a single source of truth, where all of the information around the third parties that you're actually managing can be stored. You want the ability to understand the process flow of the third parties through the system and understand where the bottlenecks might be in the organization to fix those bottlenecks and eliminate barriers to getting the job done. Clearly, having technology will reduce the time and effort on the part of your employees, and you can actually redeploy them to actually perform more strategic operations for you. Technology should have the ability to integrate multiple systems and gather information and pull all of that information from the disparate systems, again, into a single source of truth where you're able to do analysis, slice and dice the data after you've gone through and gathered a plethora of information from your existing system, from the surveys to the business sponsor, from the surveys to the third parties, to the due diligence reports and follow-ups and the like, that you're able to keep all of that and look at that in a single point, which becomes very, very flexible. And of course, flexibility is paramount. Regulations change, the ability to add levels of control or delegation of authority, or to add on new processes. You need some flexibility to adaptability going forward. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark Ignatios.
Okay, thanks, Graham. Over the next few slides, we'll go through some of the feature and functionality and how we actually went about managing and automating that third-party risk management process for us. We did that on top of Appian for various reasons. We'll talk about those here in a little bit as well. But starting up top with the actual process and what we managed to actually automate on top of that platform. We have enabled a few templates for various parts of the industry. We've seen the process is somewhat similar across industries, but there are some nuances and variances that actually transpire across the way. We have some templates that we've adapted for retail, others for the life sciences or the oil and gas industries and so forth. But primarily, one of the key differentiators here in enabling such a program is the ability to customize and really make changes to the application as it evolves. So the ability to support specific requirements for our clients, the ability to manage the solution in accordance with their overall compliance and risk appetite. In doing so, we baselined the template, and that's what we're going to walk you through here for a little bit up front before we get into the feature and functionality set. At a high level, we've identified 4 main drivers or main actors, if you will, within that process. Starting at the very top with the business sponsor. The business sponsor is traditionally at the clients. They're the primary interaction point with the third party. And that they, throughout most of the templates, we've seen them be quite active in actually managing the process throughout the actual solution itself. So they have a fairly active process in onboarding, validating the questionnaires that are actually, or the data that's actually provided by the third party, in addition to providing some of their related data as well, and then managing the handoff over to the third party. The third party is an external entity. Obviously, that's the vendor. They get the notifications through the actual solution. They actually are able to log into the application via web, self-report the information in that regard, provide any data that's actually required by the company, and return that data back into the actual system. We also have the next role is what we'll call the local compliance officer. Generally, obviously, this person will be part of the compliance organization, but in effect, they manage any reviews of any red flags or high-risk third parties that are actually aggregated throughout the process. And they primarily interact as well with the business sponsor. Generally, we haven't seen a lot of interaction, at least through the system, between the local compliance officer and the third party. So a lot of the activities here that happen is between local compliance officer to business sponsor, and then certainly moving into the corporate compliance officer as well is another role that we've assessed. At that level, generally, any escalations that may happen as a result of the actual process taking place. If it's a high risk, for example, then you might see an escalation that actually gets triggered over to the corporate compliance officer to review that particular third party. Or if there isn't really any risk, it may just go all the way back to the business sponsor. But these are the 4 primary roles, if you will, in an actual third-party risk management solution. They will vary to some degree across various clients. Sometimes we'll have various layers of escalation procedures, but these are common roles that we've seen across the solution. On this slide, I was going to take us a little bit. Again, this is primarily high-level flow, but in effect, it shows us kind of the process flow of how that evolution of third-party risk management takes place. Again, you'll notice here there's a few swim lanes. The business sponsor, which we talked about just a minute ago, the third party themselves, the corporate compliance officer, and the country compliance officer, and then the corporate compliance officer. Then we also have KPMG's asterisk team here that's also involved in this process. So I'll take us through these steps briefly, starting with the first here, the business sponsor will effectively kick off the process and initiate the onboarding of that third party. Throughout that process, a notification will get triggered to the actual third party. Before they do that, though, we ask the business sponsor in this template to go through and complete the due diligence questionnaire. So there's some self-reported data that the business sponsor will provide specifically around that third party. It could be their contact information, it could be email address that they provide, it could be the type of service and so forth that's actually provided. As that information is aggregated, the business sponsor will complete that step and then trigger a notification over to the third party. That third party will be able to log in, again, electronically via web on a digital form and complete all self-reported information that's actually requested of them. It also has, or Appian provides a document management module that we're able to use as well. So if there's any financial data and so forth that needs to be either attached or reported, they're able to do that as well. And then as they complete this step, it gets routed back to the business sponsor. At this step right here, the business sponsor is able to review in a static or read-only mode all the information that's provided by the third party, and they're able to assess at this point what that risk is. So what happens in the background as well, leveraging Appian's business rules engine, we're able to, based on the responses that are provided, to aggregate a risk factor on the actual third party. And we do that in various ways, but in effect, all the data that's actually being collected across these three steps right here will be the basis for actually generating a risk rating. We've seen the risk ratings vary from in various forms. It could be a low, medium, and high t-shirt sizing. There could be a score associated with that t-shirt sizing, and so forth. But in effect, we're able to, in the background, certainly work with our clients to evaluate what is the existing scoring that they have, and how that translates into enabling it through this through Appian's modules. But in addition to that, we're also able to provide some guidance and feedback on how to actually manage that risk, depending on what that risk appetite is. So as that risk is aggregated at this step, the business sponsor is able at this point to make recommendation on that third party based on that risk. At that point, it gets routed down to the country compliance officer, where they have the ability to review also and recommend. At this point as well, if, for example, we've seen some of our clients, if the risk is deemed high, or maybe sometimes even medium, they'd like to actually conduct some additional intelligence against that third party. In this instance, we provide them with the facility to be able to route this process over to the KPMG asterisk team, which at that point the KPMG team will be able to go off and generate an asterisk report that goes through and does a detailed intelligence reporting against that third party, and then return that report through the actual solution itself back to the country compliance officer. If there isn't an escalation that takes place, the process gets routed down to the country compliance officer, and then from there they're able to actually move the process forward. So there's a number of decisions that actually could take place here. They could actually accept the risk and then forward it, route it over to the business sponsor. They could, in fact, decide here that they want to terminate the relationship, or they could actually do some additional procedures that may be defined by the compliance organization. So either way, it gets routed all the way back to the business sponsor, and the business sponsor is able to finally go through and assess whether the third party is retained by that company. Coming into the next few sets of slides, we'll go through some of the feature sets that we've actually leveraged with the Appian platform. The first one that I get pretty excited about is really around the collaboration component. There's two parts of that communication. One is the social collaboration. That's a highly customized and configured feed here that manages interaction between the actual system in addition to the users themselves. So here we'll get an audit trail of everything that's been done against a particular third party. So that feed just kind of scrolls through as the application is, as the process is moving forward. And then users that are actually managing a third party can actually, as they log into the Appian tool, whether it's done through a single sign-on or if it's a manual login, they're able to actually get dropped on this collaboration feed and able to see where visually the audit trail of what's been done against their actual third party, able to see who did that. Obviously, this for purpose of demo here, we're using the term business sponsor, but in effect, this would be the actual person's name that's actually conducting this this activity. Or if it's the actual system doing that, you'll be able to see that as well. So that's for the collaboration. And in addition, sorry, the one thing I also forgot to mention, that the users are able to, as they log in here, they're able to drop in comments, if you will, and then interact, as opposed to having to go off in an email chain offline and have to manage communication offline in that sense. Able to, via this this module right here, to collaborate and provide feedback, ask questions, and so forth. A good scenario for this could be for a third party that's being used maybe by 2 or 3 business sponsors across the global, across the world. So you could have a business sponsor in China that's using that, in addition to a business sponsor that's in the U.S. and maybe another one that's in Brazil. They're able to track what is being done against that third party, and in fact, as opposed to duplicating some of the effort, be able to in live feed be able to see what's taking place against that. The case communication use feed as well. It's part of the same module, but here some of the hazard posts can actually be triggered. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this is highly configurable. So for example, if there is a high risk that's been triggered against a third party, that can actually scroll through the news feed here and be visible to the actual users that are designated to be able to see that particular third party. The next couple of features that I'll speak to is the reporting. I think Graham mentioned earlier that that's been one of the challenges in actually being able to manage an effective third-party risk management program. It's highly extensible what Appian provides us through its tool. We're able to, as long as we're collecting all that data within the tool, or if it's actually data outside of the our process, outside of Appian, we're able to aggregate that into a reporting mechanism. So we can get, really a number of reports. Some of the ones that we see often is maybe somebody within the compliance or the compliance VP would like to know, across the entire organization, where is the actual risk level laying at. It could be at a specific country. It could be, globally across their entire footprint, or it could be specifically related to a contract type and so forth. But parsing that information and actually reporting against it live is great facility to be able to continually assess what that overall risk is. So that's one report type that they can actually generate. There's numerous others. You'll also see that you're able to generate pie charts and so forth against the data that's provided in here. We're also able to export those to, for example, like an Excel form and so forth, and really manage all reporting through that through the reporting module itself. The next feature is our record and audit trail. This is valuable. Also, it comes certainly also enabled through the application. Being able to track at any one point how far along we are in the process is valuable. Being able to see timestamps of when a particular step has been executed, who it's been executed by, whether it's a country, whether it's a person, and so forth. That's highly valuable. It's visible throughout the application. We're also able to leverage what Mark Wilson mentioned earlier is the record feature. That's also a highly valuable feature and very useful for our clients, where we're able to actually provide a single record for any third party. So all data that's being aggregated against a third party, we're able to gather that and manage it through this record feature that Appian provides. Data against that particular third party could be just about anything. It could be the actual location for that or address for that third party. That address and contact information and so forth could actually be captured through Appian, or perhaps the client already has a system that captures that information. It could be an SAP application that's being captured. So in order to avoid some of the rekeying or some of the duplication of data, sometimes in integration with perhaps an SAP or wherever that data actually lives is needed. But in any case, wherever that data lies, we're able to actually pull it in through the actual record feature. And at any one point, anyone that's the user of the actual application will be able to log in through the records, do any kind of search against that third party, be able to open the record for that third party, and then at that point be able to view all the data associated. And it'll be transparent to them where that data is coming from. But they'll just have it all in a single location they're actually able to consume. So that's also a highly valuable part of actually being able to manage the data associated with that overall process. The next item I'll speak to is the user forms. We've also seen a lot of requirements around the user forms, and we know all of our clients are going to have different user forms. I think you heard Graham mention a bit earlier that sometimes some of our clients actually have either fairly long or maybe shorter forms. But one thing we always try to guide them to is to have not as much use of free-form text, and as we're actually building out these forms. The reason for that is it's really challenging to be able to assess risk against an actual free-form text field. It doesn't mean that we won't have any, but we try to minimize those as we're actually building out these forms. They're highly customized. Obviously, they're managed according to our client's requirements. Whether it's a drop-down or multi-select and so forth, we're able to manage the form accordingly. We are able to also quickly make changes to this form. So, in effect, obviously the program is going to mature. Sometimes the forms will change, the questionnaire will change, and so forth. One of the great facilities in actually being able to use an Appian platform is, as an IT organization or an IT team, we're able to pretty quickly go in and make updates and changes to those forms and render them back in a production state in a pretty quick fashion. The other thing I'll mention here, certainly on the forms, is some of the conditional fields that are actually manageable through the form. So we're able to, based on the response of one question, we're able to drive to a response or a field that gets triggered for the next question. So there's a lot of conditional capabilities to actually enable on the form. But also we're able to actually do localize these forms into various languages. So Appian provides us with the facility to provide multiple languages, whether it's a double byte character such as Chinese or Japanese and other languages as well. We've done these forms in 9 or so different languages in the past, and we're also able to trigger the form by language for that country specifically, so that the actual tool or technology will know who's actually being logged in and what language triggered that form in. The next feature that is very exciting as well is the mobile feature or mobile enablement that Appian provides us. These forms or the entire solution is mobile enabled. So it's either a tablet or an actual smartphone, and both for iOS or Android operating systems. One thing to note here is as we're actually developing these solutions, we don't have to develop this twice. We're actually go in, configure the actual solution, and it automatically gets enabled in a mobile form. So to give you a sense of the overall timing, so from start, from whiteboard session to actually assessing what the requirements is, to actually being able to get the solution deployed and in a production state, we can go from 8-10 weeks or sometimes up to 14 weeks. It's going to vary certainly by the requirements, if there's any integration or specific requirements that our clients will have. that would certainly drive the timing. But in a baseline type solution, without a lot of customization, potentially that timing is very much within our control. The next two, and I think we're almost done here, is the business rules engine. I did mention that as well earlier in a couple of examples, but we're able to assess all the rules that actually drive that process. So if there is any multi-layer escalations that need to be driven, whether those escalations are actually managed one way for one country. For example, we've seen sometimes some escalations in our for our clients in China may have specific escalation procedures, where as to in the U.S. they'll have another set of escalation procedures that are actually managed. We're able to manage that through the business rules engine, and actually be pretty flexible in how we actually present those. Obviously seamless to the actual users themselves. We also mentioned the risk aggregation and risk management as well. Through the business rules engine, certainly we're also able to assess pretty complex feature around risk aggregation, risk management, and so forth. So that becomes a really important part in our ability to actually provide a highly customized and highly complex features in certain instances where the requirements actually need it. Next, obviously, is the technology is also Appian provides us the ability to cloud enable our solution. So this will be obviously 100% cloud enabled for all of our users and support traditional cloud type solutions. And I think with that, one more. The last feature here that I'll mention, I think I spoke to it a bit earlier as well, is really around the ability to integrate with any third party, or with most third party solutions. We've seen a lot of times where SAP is a source of data that's of interest to these types of solutions due to a third party risk management solution. So the ability to integrate to SAP is certainly provided. Oracle products as well is another one. Sometimes we've seen Ariba, where if there's an integration with a procurement app application, either for contracting and so forth, that certainly can be seamless and be done through this integration. We've also seen instances where our clients actually have requested or asked us to integrate into their learning management system. So sometimes part of the overall compliance process and third-party risk management is making certain that our third parties are actually undergoing or completing the training for anti-bribery and corruption, or the specific training related to it. We're able to certainly also build that integration into the learning management system, where if a user or if a third party actually goes through, completes it, and actually triggers a notification back into Appian and designate that step particularly completed and completes overall compliance process as well. So with that, I think, Kevin, I'm sending that back to you.
All right, thanks, Mark. We got a couple questions coming in. I'm going to just read them off and try to assign them to the appropriate person as we go here. But clearly, guys, if I'm assigning it to the wrong person, feel free to hand it off or ask for somebody else's opinion on it. So the first question, I think, would go to Graham. The question is, the solution you discussed today deals with third-party risk management. Are there other types of risks that the solution can address?
Yeah, thank you. Today we built the solution based on Appian to deal with integrity risk as it relates to anti-bribery and corruption. We're actually in the process of building out another module that deals with IT security risk. As I mentioned up front, that is another key risk that clients are faced on an onboarding basis, and oftentimes the people dealing with IT security risk and compliance, anti-bribery and corruption and compliance. So there's some common processes, and you maybe try and touch these third parties fewer times than more times. So we're looking to actually build out another module that deals with IT security risk. In addition, I think, and Mark alluded to it as well, oftentimes you may want to add on after doing due diligence and getting to the point of there's some risk with the third party. You may want to perform some contract compliance or some kind of monitoring on that third party, and we can actually build out I wouldn't call it a module, but we can build out an add-on to it, so you can actually have a process that deals with, contract compliance aspects of your third party, so that you can track the initiation, completion, and the results of that as well. So there's a number of things that we can, tack on around. I'd say tack on, we can build on as a separate module and/or enhance the service offering that Mark alluded to.
Okay, great. Next question is for Mark of KPMG. Can the solution support more complex levels of approvals and escalations?
Yes, it can. So we'll leverage generally the Appian rules engine. At that point, what we'll try to do up front is really identify what are those various escalations through requirement process. We'll try to assess what levels of escalation should be done at, whether it varies by country or even by product, by service type and so forth, or even by third party type. And then as we do that, we'll try to work with our compliance organization or our business sponsors at that point, trying to assess what that overall flow looks like. With that in mind, we're able to define those escalation procedures back into the tool, leveraging our business tools engine, and from there be able to drive that in accordance with whatever metrics is actually provided to us.
Okay, another one I think for Graham here. Is the third party accountable for meeting or complying with any local country regulatory requirements, or is this the responsibility of the business sponsor?
Well, clearly the third party is responsible for it complying with local laws, rules, and responsibilities. Oftentimes that same third party is often responsible for complying with U.S. law when it comes to Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So clearly the third party is responsible. The business sponsor, however, their role is to ensure that the third party is meeting their obligation and obtaining enough information around that to determine that in fact the third party is meeting that obligation, and performing due diligence depending on the nature of service that is provided, that the third party has a history of complying with rules. So for example, if you have a third party that you've engaged to solicit business or property licenses or environmental licenses, clearly those are instances where you're dealing with the government. You want to make sure that that third party who you've engaged to help you through those processes has a history of performing those above board. And two, likely the contracts that you have with those third parties would have some anti-bribery corruption language that they would attest to the fact that they will comply with local laws and anti-bribery corruption laws, specifically the FCPA in a U.S. context.
Okay, another one for Mark of KPMG. Can the solution handle a complex level of risk associated with each third party?
Yes, obviously it can. Generally, the way we work through the risk is we've seen various forms of that. We've seen some organizations where they actually don't assess a risk grade, but in fact just go through and trigger red flags. So it's more of a binary decision, and that perhaps even speaks to the level of risk tolerance for that organization. But in effect, if there is any risk that's triggered, let's say we have a set of questions, and the way those questions were answered, there is risk that that was triggered. There is an appetite there to actually trigger red flag, but also to actually escalate it automatically. The other way we've seen that more commonly done is through the use of a risk rating against each third party. I mentioned earlier, I think we've seen either 3, 4, sometimes 5 levels or 5 feature sizing for the risk, and each one of those will have a specific routing mechanism across the organization to manage the overall management of that risk. But what we're able to do in doing so is sometimes, for example, we've used the CPI, the global CPI index, to weigh in heavily on that overall risk rating. But also there's, we've seen a set of about 10, actually 15 to 20 types of questions that can be answered by both the business sponsor in addition to a third party, and some questions that are actually not even answered at all, but based on the overall aggregation will generate a risk. So it's highly flexible in how we can manage that. A lot of times we actually also try to provide our business sponsors the ability to self-manage some of those, the calibration against that risk. So for example, the CPI index will change annually, as opposed to having that be an IT type transaction where you actually have to send it back to IT and have them go in and update it. We've been able to give that to an administrator on the business side where they can actually on an annual basis go in and reload the CPI, the newer CPI index and so forth. But there's quite a bit of flexibility in how we can manage that risk.
Great, thanks, Mark. I think that's all the questions that we're seeing here today. Let me just go through the list here one more time. One more question coming in. How much flexibility do you have to collect and manage documents within the solution? Maybe Graham, you could take that one.
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, the system is actually set up. I talk about a single, source of truth. You can ask questions in your, impart questions in the questionnaire that asks for example, financial information. Maybe oftentimes important because your third party may not be a public company and you can't get financial information. So you can ask them for that information, and you can upload it into the system and be maintained, and it can be reviewed. Oftentimes you might want to ask as well, do you have policies around code of conduct and anti-bribery and corruption? You can ask for those policies, and they can be uploaded and stored as well as other documents. So the system, while you can evaluate risk, you can also use it to gather some other financial and non-financial information that will be helpful to you in your evaluation of risk of that third party. That's a pretty neat feature.
Yeah, one thing I'll add sorry, Kevin. One thing I will add on the back of the document management is we've also, from an implementation perspective, we've seen a couple of different ways that we can actually be done that. The most ideal way generally around document management is for each third party, we've actually assigned on the form kind of centralized document repository for that particular third party. So any document that are actually being selected against that third party, they're certainly going to be archived, but they're also being managed in that single repository for that particular third party. So that any user internal that's actually going through to consume the data that's provided against that third party, be able to do so in a single location as opposed to having to hunt down in the form and look for those documents.
Mark, this is Mark Wilson with Appian. I wanted to extend upon both of those answers with one of the trends that we have seen around the solutions, not only in our work with KPMG, but with others. One of the benefits of Appian is that while it can be a source of record, and has been for many of these kinds of solutions, we can also be an overlay on top of multiple different systems, providing easy access to documents that might be collected, regardless of where they might reside in the ecosystem of applications that you have. We've seen a number of regulatory applications, for example, where there are regulatory systems of record within organizations that have existed for a decade or more, and there's no expectation that they're going to change, but rather than requiring users to go into those particular systems to get information or get the documents, they can be represented visually in the records features that the KPMG team has laid out here, where you can see those documents, and from an end user perspective, they really don't care where those documents are located. They just know that they can get access to them. So we have seen Appian be used as an overlay. We've also seen Appian be used as a method of collecting such documents and writing them to those systems of record and maintaining an understanding of where they're at. Great.
Thanks, Mark. All right, so I think we're coming up on the end of our time here today. I want to thank Mark and Graham from KPMG for joining us, and thank Mark Wilson as well from Appian. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. I hope it was helpful for you. If you do have any additional questions, feel free to get in touch with us directly. You can email info@appian.com with any questions that you have. And again, I appreciate everybody's attendance, and have a great day. Thanks very much.